knowing yourself, and what you're good at, and being able to be honest with it. That's what's important. I could probably force myself, go to school, learn the skills, blah blah blah, but it's just not my nature to fail fast and build.
Hey, welcome to Dev or Not to Dev, episode 0. I'm your host, Tyler Lemke, and today I'll be interviewing my good friend from high school, Yihan Wu. And he talks about why he quit computer programming. Let's jump right into it.
All right, let's get started. So, welcome to Dev or Not to Dev, and we have Yihan Wu with us. He's a good friend of mine from high school. What do you guys call it in New Zealand?
High school.
No, you guys call it college, which is confusing because we think of like community college here. Because this is my good friend from community college back in New Zealand.
No, hold on. We call it high school and college and all college. So,
did you say I school?
High school.
It's like the egotistical version of high school. It's I school, man. That's all high school is, though. So,
yeah.
Man, I'm really happy to have you on today. It is late your time and early my time, and I'm glad we could get this rolling. So,
pleasure to be here.
What were we talking about before? We had some good moments in the lead up to this, but I wanted to start off with the name of this episode. So, not the name of this episode, but the name of this podcast. So, To Dev or Not to Dev is about the struggles and the triumphs of software development. And I'm not going to go into your story right this second, but it's kind of your story that's inspired the name of this podcast. And I hope that it will have more stories on like yours, but that will have other stories that have a different twist to them as well, without ruining your story. So Yihan and I, we went to high school how long ago? So that was 2005. So it was 13 years ago. Which is pretty awesome. So, a little bit more about Yihan. So that was my first year at the high school. I went to Church College of New Zealand in Hamilton, New Zealand. You can look it up. It's now defunct, circa 10 years ago. But it was fun to go. And Yihan was one of my best friends there. We hung out a lot. We watched. I'm trying to remember. Three Dead Trolls in a Baggie videos. That's one thing we connected on. We made an end of year school video, just like randomly. I don't even know how. Do you even remember how that came about? Like,
I actually do. It was it evolved out of nowhere. Just I took my camera before the end of as the year was winding up, and we were just doing some random films, and it sort of evolved, and you sort of became the interviewer or the host of the show, and I was just the cameraman. And
I love how I usurped that.
Yeah, no, pretty much. And we just decided, let's make this a thing, and we decided to go around and interview people, and we just put together a film, which I thought was a fantastic job given our resources.
Yeah, I think I did a horrible job editing it, but I think it was fun to like film it. But if I were to, I remember I was like, we were never going to redo the editing. The whole process of editing that whole thing was just a nightmare. We were using Adobe Premiere Elements 2 and a video format that wouldn't work, and we had so many setbacks on that project. We were rendering it the night we were showing it to like 20 people at the school, like a year after graduation, right?
Yeah.
So it was hilarious. It was awesome.
Yeah.
So Yihan, we have a little bit of background. Well, the other thing is too, we've kind of kept. I have not kept contact with many of my friends from New Zealand. I can think of like 3 or 4 people who I'd still talk to on a regular basis. But honestly, we've we've kept contact better than anyone else, and I think it's more of your fault of contacting me. So I don't know, why do you keep harassing me, dude? What's up with that?
Bro, because I miss you, brother. I miss you. This is the honest answer.
That's awesome, man. So why don't we start off? Why don't you give us kind of some of your background? What happened after high school, and kind of what led up to you becoming or wanting to be involved in being a developer?
Okay, yeah, sure. I guess a quick summary would have started with my first year of university. So after university, after high school, I decided to go to university and I chose the field of engineering. And at the university where I did study engineering, as part of that first year curriculum, we all had to do this computer paper, Comp 103, I still remember. And C Sharp was the language of choice for that paper that year. And having never written a single line of code, that was my first experience doing any sort of programming. Needless to say, it was a living hell trying to meet those deadlines and assignments. But by the end of it, I'd sort of gotten a better grasp and I quite enjoyed the logic and the construction, the creative side of it. Um, and yeah, that was what initially sparked the initial interest from, oh, no way, I'm never going to be one of those computer geeks and, sit from a computer to, hey, you know what, this is actually pretty awesome. Oh, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, so I was going to ask, did you not do the computer class at school? In high
No,
school?
I did nothing at high school. The only thing close to computing would have been those information technology classes, but those were essentially just typing classes. We didn't actually learn how to network or do anything, any sort of programming. We just learned to type faster. That's all.
What was it called again?
Like information technology.
Here's a typewriter. Information technology. It's probably because whoever's like teaching the class didn't know crap, so they're like, "Oh, this is a typing class now."
It was a struggle, man. The struggle was real.
Sweet, man. So, what were you gonna say after that?
Yeah, so after that first year of university, and taking a break for a 2 year mission for my church, and then coming back, I continued my studies. Um, I took one more. There was another compulsory paper of computing paper where we had to learn a variety of languages like C++ and Fortran. Unfortunately, I didn't enjoy that paper quite as much because we learned about 6 languages, but none of them very well. But that design, that remembrance of the feeling I got from that first year paper was still there and sort of kept lingering in my mind. And I guess what got me wanting to get into it more was post graduation and when I started the working life. And I don't know, I became very interested in technology and particularly tech companies like Google and Facebook. When all these companies were making headlines everywhere for all these innovations, and also found myself being real drawn to the founders and their stories and how how you can build this like multi-billion-dollar company from your garage or from a university dorm room. And so yeah, I found myself gravitating towards it and just I guess I had like pie in the sky dreams of perhaps hey, if they can do it, then why not me. Um, and yeah, I guess that's what was really enticing about the field, being a developer.
Okay, so I guess we kind of went over when you first decided. Well, when did you first decide that you wanted to switch? Because did you talk about your background yet with what your degree was in?
No, sorry, I missed that part out. So the engineering I took was chemical engineering, or more specifically, materials and process engineering. Um, and so I finished that degree, and like there weren't too many things I enjoyed about that degree, but that computing paper, program paper, was something I did enjoy. And so as I began to work, found my first job and began to work, that's when I sort of had that longing that, I wish I did more of that because that was quite fun and enjoyable, and I liked the feeling of being able to create stuff. I wasn't always the best working with my hands, so when I was able to build something with my mind, it was actually quite satisfying. And yeah.
So, at what point were you like, I'm gonna become a developer? Do you want to go into the background of what led you from switching from the chemical engineering stuff to becoming a developer, and kind of your story there at all? Or
Yeah, sure. I'll give I guess, a brief background. So, so after I sort of worked for a couple of years in the energy efficiency field, I moved to Australia, and it was there where I tried to make a fresh start with my life. Making new friends and trying to establish a new career. But I really struggled to find work during that time because the recession had hit Australia a lot later than in the States, and so it was during that period where I was like, okay, well, since I can't find a job in chemical engineering, I might as well try and gear towards something I'm more interested in, which was, again, those same reasons why I felt developing was much more interesting. And it just so happened that the cousin I was living with, her partner at the time, was in the field, and so talking to a guy like him just sparked even more interest. But not having the qualifications or the background experience, I found it extremely difficult. But again, that desire to be a developer kept lingering in the background, despite me not being able to push myself further, even though I made attempts to upskill myself through um, online courses like Udacity and stuff.
so what year was that?
That would have been 2013, 2014. Yeah.
Okay. So you said that it was 2013, 2014. You were starting to do some of those courses and stuff. Um, when did you actually start to really code? Because I know we were talking in 2015, and you were talking about doing a few different things. I can't remember all the timeline of stuff, but when did you start really start to code for other people?
Okay. I guess when I really actually got stuck in, it would have been, oh, jeepers. I'd say about 2016. 2016. Um, yeah, because at the start of 2016, I I was lucky enough to be able to get, I guess, an internship opportunity with a um, small development company, and there I was supposed to be trained up and I guess given a shot, at the industry. So that's when I'd say that where I really got to have a real crack and really hit, where the rubber met the road and see if I had the capability or what it took to be a developer.
Right. And how did you feel as you did you feel, because you're a smart guy. Like I didn't mention this earlier, but Yihan got top in class along with another girl in our high school. So you got top in, which is called in New Zealand, it's called ducks. Is that right?
Yeah.
And but it's only for the seventh form, so it's only for your senior year. And it's you basically get the top in your class, but it's only counts towards your senior year. Is that correct? Is that how that worked?
Yeah, that's correct. That's
Okay.
correct.
So Yihan's a smart guy. He has an engineering degree. But how did it feel to be coding, and how did you feel competent? Did you feel struggles? How did you feel?
Well, it's funny you should. That's a great question, Tyler. And to be perfectly candid, on the surface, I think I was still in love with the idea of being a coder, a developer, and finally being able to get that shot. I was, real excited initially, and would I'll talk a big game with the owner of the company and be like, hey, look, we're gonna do all these wonderful things, and me and him we're getting along. But once it really came down to it, to actually trying to write something and hack away at it, man, I was way out of my depth. I was just not confident. I was not willing to fail and just yeah, I just had no idea what I was doing, and I guess I was expecting too much to be spoon fed too much, rather than just trying to figure it out and just being a real how do they say it, Silicon Valley, fail fast. I just it was just not part of my makeup, and that was the thing. Oh, this maybe lead up to your next question, but basically at the end of it, that internship ended about 6 months later, and both me and the boss of the company, who I'm still great friends with till this day, but we came to the conclusion that for whatever reason, my genetic makeup or my predisposition was, I'm so afraid to fail that it's not it's not a good fit for the development mindset. Um, and I basically my mentality was, well, I'm going to try and make as few mistakes as I can for this code to work. But as we well know, that's just not how coding works. You got to quickly build, quickly fail, and the sooner you make the mistake, the sooner you bug and make something work. And so that was sort of the conclusion.
So it wasn't a lack of intelligence, from what I'm hearing. It was a lack of being willing to fail, being willing to mess up.
Yeah.
So at what point did you decide this wasn't for me? Was it at that point or was it later on?
I think, yeah, maybe maybe a little bit before that point, where me and the boss of my internship with that company had that tough talk. I think the writing was already on the wall because I could feel myself being, I would say, I felt like I was fronting. I was talking a big game. I'd read every headline about all the tech industry, and so I knew enough the jargon to sound like I knew what I was talking about. But really, I didn't have the deep understanding or the expertise. Um, and when it was made obvious when the owner's nephew, it was, I don't know, maybe 15, 16 at the time, he mentioned that even his nephew, was more willing to fail and got more done than I did, and that was a real like red flag for me personally, and um, so yeah. But I guess the final nail was in the coffin when me and the boss had decided to have this talk, and he just said, "Look, I don't think you're cut up for this," and I had to be honest with myself. It was a bitter pill to swallow, but that was a great lesson. I'm grateful I was able to learn, and I'm glad that me and the boss are still able to be good friends. But yeah, that was a real tough lesson to learn, and yeah, I guess I was more in love with the idea of being a developer than actually knowing myself. That what I'm a developer at heart, so to speak.
Right. And what we've talked a bit about Gary Vaynerchuk, right? We've talked about Gary V. How did he play a role in you coming to this conclusion?
Yeah, well, so Gary V, I discovered him 2 to 3 years ago, and during the time of that internship, I was already a big fan. I was sold on a lot of his philosophies, and his biggest thing for people, one of his biggest things that he tries to promote and teach people is talking about self-awareness. Um, he said if there was a magic pill or potion you could sell and inject into people, he said it wouldn't be hustle, wouldn't be talent, it would be self-awareness and knowing yourself, knowing what you're good at, and being able to be honest with it. That's what's important, and that played a major role. And when I realized that, if I'm so afraid to fail, to make mistakes, which is a critical and crucial skill in becoming a developer, then I'm probably not cut up for this. Um, I could probably force myself, go to school, learn the skills, blah blah blah, but it's just not my nature to fail fast and build. And so that just played, yeah, Gary Vee played a major role in helping me to cope with, I guess, the understand that perhaps I was more just in love with the idea of being a developer than actually knowing that I am a developer at heart. So yeah, definitely Gary played a major role in that decision and coming to grips with it.
Cool. So you told me before that there's another I don't want to say weakness because I feel like that's not fair, but you said there was another thing that you weren't strong in, right? That kept you from pursuing development as well. Do you want to talk a bit about that, if you know what I'm talking about?
Um, Sorry, can you just be a little bit more specific to remember which
I'm
which
trying to like not throw you under the bus while like bring up your weaknesses. It's like
it's all good, brother. I think we can be perfectly honest here.
okay, cool. So you were talking before about problem solving, I think, or I might not be stating it correctly, but you're talking about how something like you didn't feel like breaking down problem solving in some way wasn't your strength. Can you elaborate on that? Because I'm not saying it correctly.
Yeah, okay. I think I know what you're talking about. Yeah, so problem solving again being a major component of being a good developer, major skill. Um, yeah, I'd say. Wait, was it critical thinking or self-learning?
It might have been critical thinking. So I probably just mislabeled it. So I apologize for that.
Right. Well, yeah, that sounds a bit more accurate. Yeah, although problem solving is also a skill I'm trying to work on. But yeah, definitely, I think critical thinking, the ability to stand back, analyze the situation, problem, and be able to objectively look at it and you know solve or assess the situation in every from all angles. That's definitely a weakness of mine. Where over the years I feel like I'm more of a grunt in that aspect. Although I'm able to learn and, like you said, have a bit of intelligence, but to be able to critically think independently, um, and to assess situations, I do lack that innate ability to be able to do it quickly and off the cuff. So definitely that's another skill that, again, had to be honest with myself that I knew was a weakness of mine, and that it's it's not gonna. It'll do me no good in trying to pretend to be a developer when I can't, quickly and critically analyze a problem.
So I wanted to, thanks for that. I wanted to circle back and try to get back into a little deeper here on why you decided to get out of the field. Because what I really don't want to have happen is people just decide, watch this video or listen to this podcast and decide, oh, programming isn't for me because I don't have what Yihan said I don't have. So because I think that could be a problem. So I mean, can you speak a little bit about um, you said you took about 6 months and you did other programming experience as well.
Yeah.
How would you have made the same decision if you didn't spend that time programming? Like, are you happy that you spend that much time, or do you wish you would have iterated faster and found out faster that this wasn't for you?
That's a good question. I think hindsight's always 2020, right? Um, I'm glad. I'm glad I did finally, I guess, lay to rest that potential, you know, query or question of whether or not I had the goods, had the chops. So that I'm happy about. Um, Looking back, I think it's quite obvious that I wasn't in love or had a passion for it. Um, and one thing that made it clear was that the boss of that internship, uh, he talked about how when he was 13, he would hack together something, a crappy website or whatever. Wasn't the best product, but he said he just he'd be so encompassed or engrossed in the project that he'd go and search himself innately and just try and put this together. That it was fun, like that's what he did, without being pushed or held. He didn't need his hand to be held. He didn't need to be spoon fed. Whereas felt I looking back now, it was obvious that the only the only reason I was able to accomplish anything really was that pressure to hand in assignments and to produce a software project for my university studies. That's the only reason I was able to get things done. Because when I tried to learn self teach and learn online, I was motivated. When I ran into problems that were too hard, I hit a brick wall, and I wouldn't push past it like I would if I was something deeply passionate about. Um, so yeah, I guess that's a major litmus test, you could say, or a telltale. If it's something you do for fun and you spare time, you know, you you you'll definitely have a knack for it, so to speak, or it would be a good indicator at least.
Yeah, I think that's a good indicator as well. But I actually struggle with this the same thing. Like, I find it hard personally to work on projects outside of work, outside of school
Right.
myself. But um, that being said, with stuff, and this video isn't about me, but with stuff happening in my career, I've I've come to the conclusion that I need to work outside of school. I need to work outside of work. And I've come to the conclusion that I want to gain a good mastery. And I think you come down to a clear point that that is a good litmus test. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know if there's so many developers needed out there that I don't know if that's happening to you like the first couple weeks in. Like, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, because I think a lot of people who will listen to this podcast or watch this video are people who are like 30 years old and they've
Mm,
never coded in their life, and they're
yeah.
like, is this the right thing for me, right?
Right.
And um I want to highlight a few points. So let's talk about the languages you were doing at your internship, right? So can you talk a little bit about those languages and um, about the technologies, rather technologies, languages you're using, anything you can talk about. I don't know if you have a confidentiality agreement or anything, but anything you talk about there would be probably beneficial.
Yeah. Um, to be honest, it's such a blur. And I didn't learn. Again, this just shows how much I lacked that self learning ability. But I mean, the we mostly in that 6 months, mostly just dealt with databases, and so SQL or MySQL, I think, were the languages of choice. Um, yeah, I mean, all the owner told me really, he was like, look, just don't get freaked out. Just remember, stuff goes in, stuff goes out. Like that's sort of the crux of it. And to be honest, I found database boring as hell, man.
Dude,
Um,
it's funny because like databases is my worst. It's like my worst thing. So I do you think that played do you think that played into you not enjoying your internship?
um, yeah, I think it is definitely a contribution. Yeah, it definitely wasn't the most sexy or gratifying, I guess, form of development. So yeah, that definitely would have had an effect. Um, other Yeah, there were definitely other factors that contributed to the situation not flourishing or coming or developing into the the idealistic situation as I would have hoped. But ultimately, I think, again, back to Gary Vee's self-awareness, I think I just had to be honest and say, hey, look, if this really was my cup of tea, I'd be going balls to the wall and trying to learn everything I can by myself. But I didn't. And so, I take my hat off to the owner, my friend. Shout out to Matt. That's it for you, Matty, um, who was able to help me to come to that conclusion. And so, no fingers pointing. I just had to be honest and say, hey, look, this he's right. It wasn't my. I wasn't. I wasn't innately built to be a developer, so to speak.
Cool. So I think we've kind of gotten deep into that. Now let's go back into where you're headed now. So it's kind of sad. Like I don't want to leave off on the I'm not going to be a developer. So I want to ask you a little bit about, okay, after you decided you weren't going to be a developer, what's some self-discoveries that you made that helped you move to where you are now?
Yeah, I guess so. Some post deciding not to be a developer. Again, sticking with the thesis of self awareness, thanks to Gary Vee. I guess things that sort of helped me lead to where I am now, where I'm doing a PhD in biomedical engineering, um, was just my, how would you call it? You could call it the inner voice or gut feeling. Um, yeah, because I worked for a year back in the chemical engineering field as a researcher at my old university, and that same unsatisfied, um, that gaping hole, I guess, in my soul or my heart, like it lingered, and I hated it, because when I was at work, I'd work, but then most of the time I'd be watching the clock, waiting for it to when it's home time, and that just wasn't. I was like, this isn't right. And back to Gary Vee, he says, if you look forward to Friday nights or weekends, your shit is broken. And I remember hearing that for the first time, and it was just like, it was so weird. I'm like, but doesn't everybody enjoy the weekend? Um, but he preaches about, how if you get to have a career that you're so fulfilled and so happy doing, it doesn't feel like work. In fact, you look forward to Sunday evening. We get to, go at it again the next morning. And so that really resonated with me. And it took a while, like I said, I'd known about it for a few years, but it took a while before the message really sunk in. And so last year, as I was working at the University of Waikato again, I kept having that lingering feeling, and I just wasn't happy. And so I was like, you know what? I can't keep doing this. I could have potentially stayed. Money was good. The job was flexible. Working environment was like chill, but that hole in my heart, that deep down, I knew that this wasn't for me, and that I'd only be staying just for the security of the money. And so I started looking around, and I realized that you know I'd had many friends that went to med school, and every time I'd meet up with them, I'd just converse with them about some of the topics they'd been studying, and it just became so interesting, so like fascinating to me. And then that's when I discovered that there was a middle happy ground of this thing called bioengineering or biomedical engineering. And so I figured, hey, you know what? Why not build on the foundations I already had, and meet halfway? Um, I still want to head towards the health and medicine industry, but I feel like biomedical engineering is a happy medium. And so now I'm doing my PhD in that field, and I feel like it's getting me closer towards doing what I care about and what I'm interested in, which is ultimately health and medicine.
So you mentioned something before, and I'm glad that you just told us about doing health and medicine. Can you talk a bit about how you felt like you're born to do this?
Oh, geez, born to do this. Yeah. Well, I don't know if I'd go that far, but yeah, I guess another thing that sort of swayed me, Tyler, along those lines of born to do this, uh, is the whole nature versus nurture debate. And something I've come to realize is that, my dad, he's a acupuncturist, a Chinese doctor. And growing up, I always had it, and it was always therapeutic, and it was healing for me. And um, in my new ways, I've been able to apply a few skills that I learned from dad on other people, and satisfaction I got when I was able to, you know, elevate their health or ease their um, ease their pain was the satisfaction was unparalleled. Um, and it's only been, again, these last few years where I've tried to apply more self awareness that I realized, hey, you know what? It's running through my veins. Like, my dad's a healer, um, and his blood runs through mine. And so I guess biologically it makes sense that I'm at this predisposition to also want to help people and to heal them whatever way I can. So would I go as far as to say I was born to this? Oh, maybe not quite, but definitely I have a pre inclination to do it. So
No, that's fair, man. So, um, I think it kind of comes back to I don't want people to think, oh, I'm not built to do code, because I
mm,
think there's more people that can code than they think can code. But I also like, and this is kind of comes down to philosophy of how this podcast is working out is noticing your strengths and playing on those,
yeah,
and noticing your weaknesses, right? So I want to delve into that a little bit more. And I said we were kind of done with the dev thing, but did you ever feel? Are you familiar with the concept of flow?
flow, absolutely.
Yeah. So flow is basically flow is, I can't even say the guy's name that came up with it. I think he's Russian or something like that. But flow is basically the concept of where you lose the concept of time while you're working. Would you say that? Would you agree with that, Johan?
Absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely.
Did you ever experience flow while you were programming? Ever? So let's say back to your first paper you did up to now. Did you ever experience flow? And if you did, how often was it?
You know what? That's a good question, Tyler. And I'd have to say, I think I did experience it. And the periods where I did experience that flow phenomenon would have been towards the end of that first year paper, where it had overcome this hurdle of programming for the first time, and I'd become semi fluent in C sharp, that new language, and I had a clear objective because at the very end we had to create this game, and so once I knew what my objective was and had set out the basic skeleton, and once I was like once I knew what I was like, what each component I had to build, I did find myself. I was like, hey, it's starting to make sense. Like I'm speaking the lingo, so to speak, literally the lingo of C sharp. So did I experience flow? Yeah, I did. But it took a massive concerted effort, and I had to have a specific goal in mind. Um, and again, I had to have my hand held a little bit because I remember I harassed one of my tutors to be able to, hey, look, this is really hard part. Can you please help me? And I remember getting over once he sort of said, look, if you just set this, this is how you solve this part of the problem. Once I got over that, then it sort of like I remember the light bulb sort of switched on, and I was like able to build on the rest of it myself. And yeah, so it was those rest of it, the parts where I was building myself, and I knew what I was doing exactly. That's when I did experience flow, even though it was minute compared to the rest of the time I spent debugging and trying to learn the language and stuff.
So it's interesting because I've felt that as well, and I feel like programming is the most exhilarating thing. Just like you said, healing people and getting energy from that. That's the most exhilarating thing from you. I can think of other things like having good conversations like this is really exhilarating to me too, or it's fulfilling rather. But
Likewise.
what's that?
Likewise.
Yeah. So, but that programming of getting over that arc and achieving something is just amazing feeling. And I was thinking of what you're saying there was once I got help and could get over this, I felt like I made progress. Were you feeling that at all when you were doing your 6 month internship?
Yeah, well, to be perfectly candid, no, I didn't. Um, and I guess there were plethora of reasons for why that happened, but yeah, basically it came down to just limited resource. It was a small company, and I guess it just wasn't at the time. The situation just wasn't set up to be able to handhold someone as much of a noob as I was, and so yeah, unfortunately, I wasn't able to get help overcoming that hump. But it's also very possible that perhaps the nature of the work that we're doing, like databasing, where it's just no matter how it's like putting a lipstick on a pig, as they say.
Right. So you're saying the nature of doing data because programming databases is completely different from C sharp, right? Like
Yeah,
you're using a different type of syntax. It's more of a natural language versus how you break down problems with object oriented inside of C sharp. So it's just a different beast. Um, so yeah, I think it's interesting that you said it's like putting lipstick on a pig. It's not going to change the fact if you have to kiss it.
yeah.
um, uh, I think that's a really good analogy. So moving forward, though, how have you felt flow now as you started to pursue your degree?
Um, that's a good question, Tyler. How have I found flow now? I think, well, oh, geez. I think one of the ways that I found flow now is um, when I'm able to understand these new concepts um, and to be able to explain it to others. So I'll be honest, I'm still in the middle of overcoming the learning curve because it's just a completely new field that I'm studying. A project is centered around looking at traumatic brain injury, and so I'm having to learn about neuroscience, which I've never touched in my life. And the last time I did any biology, let alone neuroscience, was back in Form 5 or Year 11 here in New Zealand. And that was during science, not even specifically biology. It was just science, the biology within the science class, where we were just learning about fungus and all that gross stuff, um, let alone human anatomy. So, in terms of finding flow now, yeah, it's just be there's little minute victories of, oh hey, this is this is what a this is what a neuron does. This is what it looks like. This is what it's named. Blah blah blah. Just little minute victories. That's where I'm finding the flow. Because right now it's just this unattainable beast of neuroscience. I'm trying my
So
best not to get overwhelmed by it.
no, I like that. That's really good. So I wanted to juxtapose this. So you said right now you're just finding these small little wins that you're getting flow from.
Right.
Yeah. And you also said that when you were doing your first year paper in university,
Yeah.
you got flow, and you especially enjoyed that exhilaration after you got over these difficult parts, right?
Yeah.
So are you finding that you get because this is, I don't know if this is unique, and this is kind of simplistic. This is kind of a simplistic breakdown of how programming works, but I found this too, is that when I'm programming a project, and especially when you're new, like when people have 20 years of experience, they don't feel this pain anymore, right? But when you're brand new at this, it's like you can hit your head against a problem for hours on end,
Yeah.
hours, days on end. And I know professionals who are still experience this sometimes, but when you're new at this, you just feel stupid, right? You feel like inadequate. Um, are you finding that same problem? Um, because I'm kind of breaking it down to, that was kind of an issue for you to find flow, right? Are you finding that same problem in your new field?
Uh, yeah, I guess I am finding the same problems. Um, but I guess because the topic is a little bit more interesting, or I'm more inclined to learn about it, it's less overwhelming. Um, I do, and I guess the structure or the environment is set up that I do have more help readily available because I have supervisors and other postgraduate students I can call upon for help. But in terms of, yeah, random similar, yes, definitely similar, but less overwhelming, I guess. Whereas, as a developer, I was completely like, whoa, okay, okay, all right, don't do it. Don't type anything, otherwise you'll get it wrong. Whereas this is more like, oh, I don't really know how that works. Like, I can go read up on literature and be like, okay, and then confirm with somebody who's a bit more familiar with the space, and be like, hey, look, so is my understanding correct that X does Y and Z or whatever?
Cool. I'm glad you explained that. So, because the way that I think about the problems, I kind of want to understand how that problem still exists for you, but how it's still fun. Because um, the way that a problem exists in with programming is typically, the way I see it, is like you get stuck, and sometimes there's nothing you can go and work on, right? Like this is the very thing you have to work on right now. Are you
Yeah.
seeing that happening where there's a concept you don't understand, and that keeps you from basically stopped in your progress? Or can you kind of break down um, how that works? Because you said that's still kind of happening. I just want to know a little bit more.
Yeah, I think what I'm learning about what I've learned so far about biology is that it's not so black and white, um, and it's very context dependent and situation dependent. So, um, for example, there's like certain cells, in the brain, and I'm like, so is that good or bad? Um, and my supervisor will say, well, it depends on the situation. And I was like, oh, great, because there'll be certain cells that causes inflammation, for example. And I'll be like, so that's bad, right? And they're like, well, it depends. Like, you know, sometimes you need inflammation, and sometimes you don't want inflammation. And so, whereas the engineering or the logic, and where he wants to be like, 0 1 0 1.
Well, that's so funny, because that's the same struggle I feel, and I've as I've studied more the past, I've kind of come to this conclusion past year or so, and is that, oh, there's only one right way to do something, right? When you're first learning programming, you're like, there's only one right way to do something, and it's that same way. Like, it's so funny because it's like, oh, it totally depends. And but the problem is that so many programmers are, or developers, or whatever you want to call us, are so opinionated that we're like, no, this is the right way to do it. And it's like, no, it depends on the context, right? It's like, um, are you coding something that's going to last a week? Are you coding something that's going to last 2 years? Is it going to last 7 years? And are you lying to yourself? Like, there's all these different things to take into account. So I think that's pretty interesting. Moving on though, I'd like to get your perspective on what advice would you give to people who are struggling
Right,
and they're because everyone's going to struggle through this unless you're some kid genius, right? Unless
right,
you're unless you're Zuckerberg, unless you're someone who's a lot of the people that I meet that don't notice the struggle as much, or at least I don't notice it in them, have been coding since they're 13. Right. I started when I was 13, but I was too lazy or didn't have the right mentorship or whatever, however you want to spin it, to to pursue it. So it's like, yeah, by the time you get to college, um, or university or whatever you want to call it, you've been programming for 7 years, right? And
right,
that's the problem. And I think people listening to this are going to be like, they're going to be there and be like, either they're in university right now and everyone around them has been coding for 10 years, or um, they see other people around them who are doing better than them for whatever reason. What's your advice to those people as far as continuing or finding what's right for them? What's your advice on leading them down the right path?
that's an excellent question, Tyler. And I think sort of, again, I can only speak from my experience and my perspective. In terms of long-term end goal, if you want to be a developer, as a career, what I'd suggest, and this is for any career choice, is to go and spend a day, a week, maybe a month even, or internship as a kid with a developer. If your dream is to work as a software developer at Google, I don't know, somehow through hookups or just rocking up at the front office, be like, hey, look, I think of becoming a developer later on in life. Would I be able to hang out or be mentored and just see what it's like? Spend a day. Um, because just like any job in the world, we only see the glitz and the glam. We don't see the long hours. We don't see the debugging, the painstaking process of overcoming that one problem that can get them over the hill. Um, and then after spending that time, get a better gauge and a better feel, rather than just, like what happened to me. I was drawn to the success story and the glitz and the glamour of these tech billionaires who built this massive, this innovative, world changing technology from the garage or from their college dorm room. Um, I guess something else, in terms of, so what would you say, like, how to what was the second part of your question, like how to overcome struggles or problems?
I guess the gist of it was just, how do you decide, if it's right for you, or how do you how to move forward? Yeah, like, go into that, like, how can you what's your advice as far as like how long you should keep trying?
Right.
Um, I guess is what I'm trying to get out of it. And this is your advice, right? Like everyone's different. I don't want people to think, oh, this is cut and dry.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay.
uh, but how long do you think you should keep trying, or what indicators should you look for, or something like that?
Right. In terms of time length to try for, but yeah, I don't think I can't personally give a concrete answer. But in terms of indicators, I think I'm able to speak on a much more, based on personal level. So indicator wise is first and foremost what Gary Vee says: be self-aware. Just be honest with yourself. You know, if you are naturally drawn to this, you probably do something about it in your free time. You know, that's generally a good rule of thumb. You know, or if you look through your search history, like you're looking up, Stack Overflow all the time to help solve personal projects or problems. Um, and I guess in terms of indicating for where they should keep going, you know, if you run into problems and you're not able to solve it by yourself, personally, that's not necessarily an indicator that you shouldn't. Try and find mentorship. Try and find a teacher that can help you. Perhaps that's where you need to get over that little hump. Um, but yeah, ultimately, I'd just say, be honest with yourself. And if you don't feel that fire, if you're not if coding doesn't, you know, get you in flow, I was gonna say tickle your fancy, but that's someone else. If it doesn't put you in that flow zone, very often than not, more often than not, and I'd say that's a general indication that it's probably not for you. Um, but if you run into problems and you're like, oh man, like, ooh, how can I solve this? And you're looking at a variety of ways of doing it, and it gets your fire going, then I'd say that's a pretty good indicator that you're cut up for this, even if you don't know the answer right off the cuff.
Cool, man. I've really appreciated you sharing your story. I know it's been a struggle. I know it's a lot of realization and stuff. I think you could hear it and see it. Depending on how you're consuming this. You actually do YouTube as well, so I kind of lied and said this is going to be a collaboration video, but it's kind of more of just an interview. um,
No worries, man.
You feel free to post this to. I'll give you the cut of it or whatever, the original. And feel free to post it to your channel. But do you want to go ahead and tell us a little bit about your channel and go ahead and plug it?
Oh, gee. Yeah, so again, to be perfectly upfront and honest, I haven't done too much with my channel for, my goodness, probably come up a year now. Been busy trying to live that PhD life. But my channel, I guess I started as a vlog just to, once again, adhere to Gary Vee's advice of documenting versus creating content. I guess just to document that journey of, where my career is going to take me. And yeah, my channel is subtract add. So that's subtract the word, to the number, and add. So that's the same on Snapchat, Instagram, YouTube.
Ad is ADD, right? Not ad as an advertisement.
Yeah, sorry, add is an A. Yeah. So subtract the word, to the number, and add as an ADD. So it's just a vlog that I guess I'm documenting my journey, and which I should probably get back onto documenting more. But I've just been real slack and lazy.
Well,
yeah.
dude, yeah, this is part of it. So I really appreciate you, Han, and I think people will get a lot out of this, out of this video, especially if they've been programming and at it for months or hundreds of hours or whatever, and they're like, dude, I don't know if this is for me anymore, and I think they might get some release.
Yeah.
And we never talked about this, but just to finish off, what did it feel like when you finally decided, hey, this isn't for me?
Yeah, well, I mean, initially it was a bit of a, I take pride in my work and the things I do, and I guess initially it was a huge hit on my ego, and um, I wasn't in the best of headspace, and so it just felt like it was a kick in the gut once again. Another L in my column. But looking back now, I guess comes a realization that, hey, look, I was being honest, and ultimately it's the truth that will win in the long run, and at the end of the day. Facades and lies will maybe win in the short term, but in the long run, will ruin you. And so, looking back now, I'm really glad and I'm so grateful that I was able to, um, one, have the opportunity, and two, to come to the realization, hey, look, I'm not cut out for this. That way, that chapter of my life can come to close. And I'm a person that likes closure. I don't like cliffhangers. So it's good that I was able to get closure on that chapter of my life, to be able to move on and be like, hey, let's, well, I guess that didn't work. So let's move on and find out who Ihan really is rather than who he would pretend or would like to be. Just because, this like the whole entrepreneurship and tech tied like these, young billionaires, like glitz and glamour stories, success stories, just so enticing right now. And then you got TV shows like Silicon Valley that just, epitomizes, the whole tech industry. So it's really easy to be drawn and to be sucked in and thinking, oh, if they can do it, so can I, type of mentality. Um, so yeah.
So I see some of that there, and I see that you didn't get stuck in the sunk cost effect, at least not permanently, right? And if do you understand that that phrase? It's like when you putting good money after bad, like putting money into a business that's failing, or putting or into a relationship that's failing.
Yeah.
You didn't get stuck in that mentality, and it's funny that you mentioned that, because I did the same thing with Amazon, right? With wanting to start an Amazon business, I was like, I'm going to do this, and I found that I didn't have the mentality to do the entrepreneurship stuff that I needed to do to be successful with that. And so I think that kind of matches your experience. How does it feel right now, though? Like, now that you have that closure, how does that feel?
As one who prides himself on this logic, I guess the emotional part of me, um, you know, oftentimes more than I like to admit, does override that logic. And right now, honestly, Tyler, I'm at peace with it, and it feels great's not the right word. I feel at peace, or congruent, I think. Yeah. Um, Congruent because I know I've been honest. Um, that I'm not fronting. I'm not trying to put up a facade. I'm just being honest. And so I'm really at peace with it. Yeah. So I think congruent would probably be the most accurate word. Yeah. Or at peace. 2 words.
Well, I don't know of a better way to end this. So I think we'll go ahead and end right there. Thanks again, Yihan. It was great to hear a little bit about your story and to know where you're going, and ultimately to know that it's okay to move on and do something else. I think you've just empowered a lot of people to have that same congruency in their life. So thanks for that, man.
Awesome. Thank you, pleasure. I really hope this can help somebody out because, yeah, I'm much happier. I'm much happier now.
Cool. Thanks, Ihan.
All right. Cheers, Tyler.
Hey, I'm so glad you could be with us today as we shared some stories, and that Ihan shared that great and magnificent story of why he quit programming. I really hope that if you're in the same situation where you're like, hey, should I keep on going on in this good fight, that you really take it seriously, that you talk to mentors, that you talk to those around you, and make sure that whatever you're struggling with, that it's not something that everyone's experiencing that you can overcome. That being said, if you feel like Ihan does, or if you feel like it's not right for you, I hope this inspires you to maybe seek out another occupation that might be a better fit. Lastly, on that same point though, is that there may be some other programming that you can do that you might enjoy. Maybe you enjoy front end over back end code, or maybe you just really don't like SQL and that's what you've been doing, just like Ihan did. So make sure that you try all your different options before quitting, because this can be a really wonderful and fruitful field. That being said, I hope you like and subscribe and follow us. This will be on YouTube and also be as a podcast as well. So make sure to subscribe to the podcast and subscribe to us on YouTube. It'll be under Tyler Lemke as a channel name, and we really hope to see you again soon. Thanks so much.